a feedback loop between self-domestication and dog domestication contributing to language evolution. We wish to start by sincerely thanking the organizers of this online Cultural Evolution Society conference for inviting us to present this talk. Thanks also to all the attendees to this recorded talk. Our talk deals with the ongoing effort for understanding how language evolved in our species. Nonetheless, for the most part, research has been centered on cognitive and behavioral changes within our species. We will argue that bonding and pro-social communication with other species, particularly the dog, might have contributed, even if minimally, to the mechanisms promoting structural complexity in human languages, mostly through cultural mechanisms. Our hypothesis unfolds under the umbrella of a fresh account of human evolution that see many of our traits resulting in part from a reduction in reactive aggression and an increase of pro-social behavior that parallels what we can find in many domesticated species, hence the label of human self-domestication. Reduced levels of aggression seemingly enabled the full exploitation of our cognitive and behavioral potential for interacting with others through a verbal mechanism, and ultimately the cultural evolution of language features. In turn, language enhances inhibitory control of emotions, thus facilitating the refinement and control of cognitive functions involved in language processing. Overall, we argue for a feedback loop between self-domestication forces and language. This seemingly entails some sort of gene-culture co-evolution. In mammals, domestication is usually triggered by selection for tameness, with most domesticate exhibiting some common features. This so-called domestication syndrome has been hypothesized to result from a mild neural crest cell migration deficit during embryonic development, as Wilkins described. Compared to other hominins, modern humans exhibit many of the traits commonly found in other domestic mammals, including reduced skulls and brain, childish facial features, reduced hair, prolonged childhood, increased playing behavior, and particularly less aggressive behavior. Hence the claim that we might have gone as well through a domestication process. As far as humans are concerned, several external factors might have triggered our self-domestication, including the rise of community living, co-parenting, selection toward less aggressiveness of bonding partners, and toward tolerance of extra-group individuals, or the living in harsher environments like those resulting from the last glaciation. Self-domestication can be viewed as a kind of niche construction. Hence, the physical, behavioral, and even cognitive changes brought about by self-domestication are hypothesized to have favored the emergence of many human-specific distinctive features, including our enhanced social cognition, increased cooperation, and extended social networks, and ultimately our advanced technology and sophisticated culture. The findings that domestication triggers some complexity in some birds, and incidentally barking in dogs and tamed foxes, led to the hypothesis that human self-domestication might have contributed as well to language complexification in our species. As noted, this is hypothesized to have resulted mostly from some of the behavioral consequences of self-domestication, reduced reactive aggression and increased prosocial behavior, seemingly enabled more frequent and diverse contacts with others, this favoring language learning and teaching, language practice, and ultimately the evolving of new forms of language better suited for conveying meanings through human social networks that had become wider and more complex. In fact, one can expect a feedback loop between self-domestication processes and language complexity. Whereas reduced aggression is expected to have contributed, as noted, to language complexity, language is a good strategy in turn of dealing with emotions, so that verbal grooming as well as the replacement of physical aggression with verbal aggressive terms can be expected to have reinforced self-domestication features. Now we will show evidence for a positive feedback loop of dog domestication and human self-domestication contributing to language evolution, which is at the core of our presentation today. The onset of dog domestication, which started about 40,000 years ago, correlates with increased features of human self-domestication, which might have reached its peak about 35,000 years ago, when cultural evolution of modern humans took an enormous leap too. Archaeological findings like dog and dog-human graves during the Paleolithic period point out the deep emotional link between first dog and Paleolithic people. Our hypothesis that this intense inter- and conspecific contacts might have contributed to increase the features and the consequences of self-domestication in humans through a reduction in reactive aggression, ultimately resulting from longer and more frequent contacts between dogs and humans and the development of a working together culture. Supporting mutual hunting success, transporting skills, the widespread of social networks, and dogs even evolved a new eye muscle due to communication with humans known as doggy gaze. The active social domestication hypothesis, in which we have been working for a long time, would provide a plausible rationale for all the aforementioned changes. Accordingly, reduced environmental stress associated to the domestic niche is expected to affect cerebral glucocorticoid receptor activity in the hippocampus, mostly epigenetically by decreasing the sensitivity to stress excess. This in turn resulting in increased dendritic growth and enhanced brain plasticity. These physiological changes could contribute significantly to improvement of prosocial behavior, inhibitory control, and theory of mind associated to domestication. This is also interesting in view of the fact that in our species, due to self-domestication processes, an enlarged hippocampus has been hypothesized to result in improved episodic memory, allowing mental travel in time, but also contributing to some core aspect of language, namely recursion. This ultimately means that changes associated to human-dog co-living could be also extended to the discussion around the full emergence of our social brain, not just our distinctive behavior. Genetics provides additional support for our hypothesis. Genes positively selected in modern humans are enriched in candidates for mammal domestication, particularly dog domestication. Interestingly, this overlap encompasses high prevalent human cognitive diseases impacting on social and communicative abilities which present with altered features of self-domestication. For instance, a genomic region found to be under positive selection in domestic dog breeds causes Williams syndrome in humans when deleted. People with this condition exhibit increased prosociality as well as notable language skills in some domains, particularly lexical semantics. In our view, this finding suggests that in dogs, selection toward domestication targeted a limited set of behavioral genes with larger phenotypic effects that facilitated the coexistence with humans. In humans, coexistence with dogs would have triggered or favored changes in the same genes, resulting in human distinctive prosociality. To sum up, in this talk we have hypothesized about the consequences of human-dog interaction for the evolution of their respective cognitive and behavioral distinctive features with a focus on communication. There are notable parallels between dog domestication and human self-domestication that are suggestive of some sort of dog-human coevolution and possibly of a co-domestication process resulting from such interactions. To be more precise, we wish to argue in favor of dog domestication and human self-domestication being engaged in a positive feedback loop that might have contributed to potentiate their respective prosocial behaviors and socio-cognitive abilities and ultimately their communication skills via the physiological mechanisms responsible for stress and aggression management. In the case of humans, the process we have sketched in our talk might have contributed even subtly to the emergence of modern languages, paving the way for widespread social networks and ultimately larger communities and civilization. We think that our hypothesis set forth several testable predictions that opens new avenue for future research. In the domain of genetics, it could be interesting to delve into the analysis of the convergent signals of domestication found in humans and dogs, looking for a rationale of the observed behavioral and cognitive changes, but also for evidence of the hypothesized coevolution through a gene-cultural mechanism. It would be interesting to know more about patterns of interactions with a focus on communication abilities between dogs and peoples suffering from condition-entailed altered socialization, patterns and aggression, management and abnormal features of self-domestication in humans, including Williams syndrome as noted, but also autism. Finally, as dogs seem to have fully domesticated in Eurasia, it could be interesting to look for differences in the aspects highlighted in the paper between human groups from this region and from places where dogs arrived much later, like South Africa or Australia. Thank you for your attention.